Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the third installment of Consultants in Carhartts Drinking Coffee. We have some new participants on this particular video. Richard Teddy from Kiewit is going to join us. Also Michael Williams and Wade Meyer from Bailey, who are doing some pretty advanced lean work, are going to join us. And our original three on this video are George Zettel, Chris Heeger, and James Peace. So welcome back, everybody. Again, this is the third installment. I'll get the first two installments to the rest of you if you're interested in them. But let's just get right to it. The point of this video is going to be managing detail, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that here in just a few minutes. But let's start from the beginning. This video is going to assume that you're pretty good at some things, and those things would be the Last Planner scheduling system. So you'd be good at daily huddles, you've got full engagement, your tick list and your 6-week look ahead are at least at 90%, usually better than that, and that means PPC, right? Your walks work, so you do all 4 of your walks well, your pre-huddle walks so you understand where the job's starting, your hourly walks so that you're monitoring progress, your issues walks so you're getting all the right people together and you're practicing Genchi Genbutsu correctly when you have an issue. And then your weekly walks to make sure that your PM and superintendent dyad, your primary dyad on the job, are managing the big picture and all of the detail under it. Your PPC works, and that means that you collect your PPC and variance data, but it also means that you use that data to drive your improvement projects. So you should have A3 projects processes in place, you should have PDCA processes in place, or just general improvement processes based on the data that you're collecting. Your OAC process works. You're doing confirming RFIs. The OAC group has the issues log. You're calling out to do your reminders every week, which is a big part of making the issues log work. And then my latest client just added something which is a priority column on the issues log, which really worked out well. It helped the whole team understand which issues should we be working on first, which ones are the most important, basically critical path, and which ones can wait a few days. It's worked out fantastic. You also have philosophies and methodologies consistently applied, not just by you guys, but by the folks out on the team, out on the job site. And we just had a guy last week who had a problem with one of his trades that is been a problem the entire time. They're on notice. They're you know, that every meeting with them is conflict. It's really tough to watch. But they had that trade out, the owner of that trade. And when they stood there and went over all that detail that they needed to go over, open issues, things that just need to be completed, things that needed to be resolved, it turned out that it wasn't so big a deal. It wasn't so difficult, right? Like we always learn with Genchi Genbutsu. And he learned this, but in the meantime, he did something. And when they started talking about all of the miscommunications due to the way they try to talk through email, they started to realize that the frustration was just as much on the trade side as it was on the contractor side. Just really tough to communicate through email. And so the superintendent of the contractor said, look, let's just have a meeting next week. We're going to get your team together, my team together. We're all going to sit down. We'll get the right stakeholders. And we're going to go over each of these issues that we've been trying to work out through emails. And we're not going to do it through email anymore. Well, that was a guy really driving the methodology, wasn't it? The philosophy. That was somebody who didn't just understand while he was applying it over here. He started to get it internally. And once somebody gets it internally, you'll see things like this happen. I think with all of you, I've in the past called it critical thinking. And that's what it is. We want to make sure that these guys are able to go out and apply it in a way that we hadn't even thought of, right? So they're starting to have real personal growth. They're starting to get some depth to their training and understanding of the lean philosophies and methodologies. So what they've learned here set a baseline, and it started to bleed over into some more sophisticated work. So that's what we're talking about. We're also talking about people driving the process, right? So your team drives other components of it. In other words, if we weren't doing well in our huddles in a day or two, they would notice that right away, and then they would have a fix immediately, same day or next day, right? So we want to see them driving these processes. We want to see them getting the information and philosophies and methodologies at more of a core level. So one of the best feelings in the world is when that happens. I hope that happens to you guys a lot. It happens to me quite a bit, but it usually takes a few months with a client before it begins to happen. It's starting to happen with a new client. It really feels good. All right, so we're going to stop the line, especially when the primary dyad sees things beginning to falter. So if what we were just talking about is specific issues, when we see the entire process, the whole lean process start to falter, we want to be sure that that primary dyad steps back, stops the line, and says, hey, guys, we were doing great. We can see that we're starting to falter immediately. Let's all stop, take a breath, and talk about it. Let's get this thing figured out and get back on track today, not tomorrow, and not 2 days from now. If we let any time go by, we'll allow old habits to creep back in. And those come back in real easy because we're already used to them. They're already habits. So when we're trying to go through this kind of change, it's going to be important that that team is able to stop the line, self-recognize when that should happen, and then escalate correctly. We also are talking about the science of sustainability, right? So we know that TWI is a scientific method of making sure that human beings can follow a process, they're trained correctly, and that we're certain that they are executing that process correctly, and that training's on the trainer rather than on the student, right? Huge philosophical change. All right, and then Kamishi Bai helps us take the complexities of the science of sustaining and helps us simplify them, right? It helps us understand what we're going to audit, and not in vast detail for any particular thing, but understanding the 2 or 3 bullet items that we really should audit for each role or each process, and then make sure that we're going out and in a robust fashion doing those audits consistently. So that's what Kamishi Bai will do for us. All right. So now, assuming that all this is in place, assuming this is your organization or the at least one of the projects you're personally working on, you've got most of these things in place, and you're feeling pretty good about the fact that you're well down the road. You don't have to be doing them perfectly, but you're well down the road with these processes, and you're still working on building them, right? People are still learning, they're still growing, you're headed the right direction. Well, what you're going to run into when you get to that point is driving to completion type issues, right? Ball in court. How do you manage little things that are going to take several steps to conclude and make sure they keep moving? It's been my experience that, let's say in an OAC meeting, OAEC meeting, if you do that weekly or every 2 weeks, you can have a series of issues that need to be completed to get an entire task done, right? And so an example of that would be some issue where the engineer has to go take a look at something. He does, it only takes him 30 minutes to look at it, and he's supposed to get back to the architect afterwards, but we wait for a week before we get back to the architect because that's when we're going to see him next, so that we can really explain it to him and they're sitting there together. Then the architect has to do something next with it, go check with the owner, make sure he has their blessing, and that's going to take him a week because that's the next time he'll see the owner. And the process keeps going, something to that effect. And oftentimes we even just lose track of that process and we forget because we're trying to use our memory to remember all these different things that we're supposed to be doing and where we are in those processes. And of course that's just a recipe for failure. Human beings, our minds don't work like that. We're not computers. We don't remember vast detail and where we are in the process and which part we own and which part somebody else owns and who's managing it, etc. So we call that driving to completion, closing the loop, getting all the way around to the final solution, and then managing ball in court. So this is what we're going to be working on next with the client I have up in Canada. We're going to be working on how to manage this sort of vortex of issues that happens, right? It's like issues and problems and decisions, things that we need to do that sort of fall into this vortex of processes just like the one I was just describing. Another good example here is you go into an area with your electrician, plumber, sprinkler, HVAC, and you're looking up and you see all these areas that are really tight and you're going to have to get all this stuff in these areas. and you all work it out, right? So you do your Genchi Genbutsu, you have all the right stakeholders there, you really arm wrestle through the whole thing, everybody steps back and goes, okay, we got it, right? Now we get it, we get what everybody's doing. Now you have to come back and manage how it all happens, because if you're on a project like the one we're on that's under tremendous pressure to complete in a very short period of time, then we're going to have to chase each other through that process. And if we have to chase each other through that process, that means we're going to have to be very, very careful that we're installing these things in the right order before we move to the next area. So the next trade can come right in behind us and the next trade behind them, and that we're not causing conflict for each other, right? So whoever's going to manage that process, it's absolutely key that they understand how to manage those steps. Again, ball in court. And that can often mean just bringing that group back for 2-3 minutes and saying, okay, here's where we are. We just want to make sure we got this next step exactly right. So HVAC, you're coming in next, right? And then sprinkler, you're okay behind them, right? And you just have those mini conversations from that first original big conversation. Managing ball in court isn't that difficult. It's just another one of those disciplines that we have to follow, right? So the other big issue that we often have, and I've noticed this with all jobs, almost all jobs, is that you have some trade that's really struggling. They just aren't flowing well. They can't make the decisions they need to make in real time. Communication is always difficult. You always have all these misunderstandings. It's one of those things we have to learn to do, because it is part of the should be versus what is philosophy, right? Just a common lean philosophy. When we have that trade, we originally start to get frustrated because we're like, God, that guy should just be better. He should be managing better. He should, everybody else isn't having the same problems he's having. He should be running his company better. You'll hear people say things like, I don't even know how he survives or makes money, right? Okay, once all that conversation is done and it's natural to get frustrated right in the beginning, then we can all step back, kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, look, we're going to practice should be versus what is, and we're going to help this person manage. And the last couple of weeks we had a great example of that out on this job I was just talking about up in Canada, where we had a trade that was really struggling. We brought them in, and when we stood there with the owner and went through every single item in detail, it was amazing how everybody understood exactly what needs to be done, excuse me, exactly in what order, and how to drive to completion. And so everybody had a good feeling at the end of that meeting. And this is a trade that people are just, the trade and the contractor are just so frustrated with each other, they can hardly even communicate. They can hardly even talk with each other. But at the end of that meeting, they all stood back and said, wow, that went really good. I mean, we all understand exactly what needs to be done and who needs to do it. Now, they still need to manage it, right? Drive to completion, close the loop, ball in court, because you know as well as I do, as well as that meeting went, there's still going to be miscommunications. There's going to be things that come up that change things, and everybody can get, and emotions can escalate again, right? Really quick. So we have to be prepared for that. We have to know what we're doing here. Okay, so again, we're good. We're good at LPS. We're good at the walks, feeling good, like we're really making some good progress. We're doing our PPC and variance reporting, and we're solving some of those issues, starting to get our arms around how to do that. OAEC, so confirming RFIs and the issues log, we're doing well there. We see all of our people starting to get lean philosophies and methodologies at a deeper level. They're starting to have personal growth, that's even beyond our own experience. And they're starting to teach us in particular ways, right? Which is why we do these videos. We all learn off each other. That's natural. But we're starting to really understand that they're getting that. We're starting to understand that people are managing really what we call all this. What we call this is monitoring progress rather than reporting on results, right? So down here, you're saying, we're going to make sure that we're monitoring progress here at a higher level, where we say the whole project is moving along and not dropping off, and if it does, we recognize it. So that's monitoring progress. In the science of sustainability, TWI, Kamishibai, again, that's monitoring progress, isn't it? It's making sure that we're holding our gains and continuing to move forward, because we can't move forward if we're not holding our gains. Okay, and then all that led to, hang on, when all that happens, what's going to raise its ugly head, and it's a real gift for us, right? What's going to really hit us is the fact that there's this sort of weird vortex where all these issues and problems and things go that really get muddled, and we're just not sure how to work those things out. So we'll report back to you guys as we go through the next couple of weeks. But of course, the reason I'm sending you this video, I know you guys already know all this. The point of me sending you this video is hopefully to get some feedback. I'm sure you guys have had some experiences that are relevant. And if you have, I really am looking forward to hearing back from you as soon as possible, because next week I'll be back up on that job site and we're going to start really working on this stuff.